At 10:23 a.m. on June 15th, 1942, over the Thames estuary, squadron leader Geoffrey Don banks his Supermarine Spitfire Mark Virabee hard to port. The Merlin engine screams, propeller clawing through humid air at 12,000 feet. Below, the estuary glints like hammered steel. Intelligence had reported a new RAF aircraft conducting speed trials, something wooden, improbable, dismissed by Luftwaffe intercepts as propaganda. But there it is, a twin-engine silhouette streaking eastward at a velocity his altimeter cannot reconcile with its profile. The radio crackles. Command confirms Mosquito prototype B, Mark IV, estimated 405 miles per hour, unarmed. Don watches it disappear into cloud. In that moment, the air war's arithmetic shifts. 3 months prior, Bomber Command had projected the Mosquito's operational speed at 360 miles per hour. The trial data, filed that afternoon at Farnborough, recorded 407. The margin between expectation and measurement would rewrite targeting doctrine. Don levels his Spitfire. The wooden aircraft is already gone. On April 22, 1942, Hauptmann Dietrich Müller of Jagdgeschwader 26 stands on the tarmac at Abbeville-Drucat in occupied France, reviewing morning intelligence summaries. The document mentions a British bomber designated Mosquito, constructed primarily from wood due to aluminum shortages. Müller's squadron had intercepted similar reports in March, dismissing them as disinformation. Wooden airframes belonged to the previous war. The Bf-109 F-4 fighters arrayed behind him represent machined precision, Daimler-Benz engines, stressed aluminum, armoured glass. At the daily briefing, Oberleutnant Haas reads aloud from a decoded RAF transmission. The Mosquito prototype had achieved 398 miles per hour in level flight. Haas pauses. Holtz construction, he mutters. Wood construction. The pilots exchange glances. Their 109s, unburdened, manage 370. Müller taps the report. If accurate, interception geometry collapses. But he notes the word prototype. Production models, he assumes, will carry weight, armament, operational drag. By afternoon, Müller flies a routine patrol over the channel. The sky remains empty. The wooden bomber, for now, is rumour. In the squadron log, he records, enemy claims unverified. Await confirmation. Across the channel on May 8, 1942, squadron leader Geoffrey Don attends the morning briefing at RAF Horsham St Faith. Group Captain Embry, recently returned from High Wycombe, describes the Mosquito's capabilities with measured enthusiasm. The aircraft, he explains, is a departure. No defensive guns, minimal crew, speed as armour. Don has flown Spitfires since 1940, trusts their agility, their proven record. A bomber without turrets contradicts instinct. Embry displays reconnaissance photographs. A Mosquito prototype over Cologne, captured by a German flak battery at 18,000 feet. The anti-aircraft fire trails behind the aircraft by a full second. Don studies the image. The bomber's outline is sleek, almost fragile. Embry continues. The Mosquito carries a 4,000-pound bomb load at cruising speeds, faster than most fighters can sustain. Expected losses, based on projected interception rates, hover near 4% per sortie. Don compares this mentally to Wellington losses, 12% in recent months. After the briefing, Don walks the dispersal area. Spitfires idle in revetments, their Merlin engines ticking as they cool. The Mosquito, he thinks, inverts the logic of survival. Speed replaces steel. He wonders if the logic will hold under fire. Flight Sergeant Henry Barnes reports to the de Havilland facility at Hatfield on June 3, 1942, assigned to the Mosquito production engineering team. He is 26, trained in airframe stress analysis, recently transferred from Vickers. The factory floor surprises him. Instead of aluminum rivet lines, he finds woodworking stations, balsa sandwich construction, plywood fuselage shells curing in heated moulds. The Mosquito's frame is laminated birch ply, bonded with casein adhesive under pressure. Barnes examines a wing section. The surface is smooth, almost glassy. An engineer named Clifford explains wood absorbs vibration, resists shrapnel fragmentation, and requires no strategic metals. Barnes checks the specifications. The airframe weighs less than a comparable aluminum structure by nearly 800 pounds. That margin translates directly to speed. On June 11th, Barnes observes the first operational Mosquito taxi for deployment. The twin Merlin 21 engines produce 1,250 horsepower each. The aircraft accelerates down the runway with startling quickness, lifting after 400 yards. Barnes times the climb rate, 2,000 feet per minute. He notes this in his logbook. Later in the canteen, he overhears skepticism from RAF liaison officers. Wooden bombers won't survive sustained operations. Barnes reviews the stress tests. The data suggests otherwise. The Mosquito, improbably, is overbuilt. On July 19, 1942, Mosquito B Mark IV serial W4064 departs RAF Marham at 04:15 hours for a photo reconnaissance mission over Trondheim, Norway. Pilot Officer Rupert Clerk and Navigator Flight Sergeant Reg Mays fly the aircraft, unarmed, relying solely on altitude and velocity. The flight plan projects a round trip of 1,400 miles, 7 hours airborne. At 07:30, crossing the Norwegian coast at 27,000 feet, the Mosquito is detected by Luftwaffe radar at Herdla. Two Bf-109 G2 fighters scramble from Werner's airfield. Clerk receives no warning. Radio silence is protocol. At 08:05, the 109s close to within 2,000 yards, climbing hard. Clerk pushes the throttles forward. The Mosquito accelerates to 410 miles per hour at altitude. The German fighters, oxygen-starved and fuel-limited, cannot match the sustained speed. By 08:20, the intercept is abandoned. Clerk completes the reconnaissance, photographing ship movements in Trondheim Fjord, and returns to Marham by 11:40. The post-flight report notes fuel consumption within projections and zero defensive action required. At High Wycombe, analysts review the photographs and the timeline. The Mosquito had outrun purpose-built interceptors without evasive maneuvers. The data is distributed to Bomber Command planning sections that evening. A new operational assumption emerges: speed negates defense. By August 1942, 4 Mosquito squadrons are operational, conducting daylight raids across occupied Europe. On August 25th, 9 Mosquitoes from No. 105 Squadron strike the Gestapo headquarters in Oslo, Norway, from low altitude. The mission brief specifies a direct attack, no preliminary bombing, no fighter escort. Flight Lieutenant Peter Klebo leads the formation. They approach Oslo Fjord at 50 feet, using terrain masking to avoid radar detection. At 11:52, the Mosquitoes climb sharply, releasing delayed fuse bombs onto the target building from 1,500 feet. Norwegian resistance records later confirm the headquarters was destroyed, with Gestapo files incinerated. All 9 aircraft returned to base without loss. The mission duration, 4 hours, 20 minutes. Fuel reserves upon landing, sufficient for another 30 minutes. In London, Air Chief Marshal Harris reviews the operation summary. The absence of losses on a daylight precision raid represents a statistical anomaly. Harris notes this in his diary. Mosquito concept validated. Speed renders fighter escort unnecessary. At RAF stations across Britain, bomber crews received the news. Among Wellington and Stirling squadrons, where losses routinely exceed 10%, The Mosquito's performance generates both admiration and unease. The aircraft operates outside traditional doctrine. Its success implies that previous losses, men, machines, missions, might have been preventable. In early September 1942, Luftwaffe intelligence compiles reports of Mosquito operations. Oberst Josef Schmid, head of Luftwaffe intelligence, presents findings to Reichsmarschall Göring at a conference in Berlin. The data is troubling. Between July and August, Mosquitoes flew 163 sorties over German-occupied territory with a recorded loss rate of 1.2%. Schmid notes that conventional RAF bomber formations during the same period experienced losses near 8%. Göring interrupts. He questions the validity of the data. How can a wooden aircraft outperform Germany's fighter defences? Schmid offers photographic evidence. Reconnaissance images showing mosquito contrails at altitudes beyond the effective ceiling of many German interceptors. He suggests reallocating high-altitude fighters to counter the threat. Göring dismisses the recommendation, citing resource constraints. The Mosquito, he argues, is a nuisance, not a strategic threat. On September 15th, however, a Mosquito penetrates to Berlin in daylight, dropping propaganda leaflets over the city centre. The intrusion coincides with a speech by Göring, who had publicly guaranteed Berlin's invulnerability. The propaganda impact is severe. Göring orders increased fighter patrols over German cities. The allocation diverts resources from Eastern Front operations. The wooden bomber, dismissed as a novelty, is reshaping defensive priorities. The diversion is measurable. 47 additional fighters reassigned by month's end. Flight Sergeant Henry Barnes works through the night of October 12, 1942, at RAF Marham, diagnosing a Merlin engine malfunction in Mosquito DZ-414. The aircraft is scheduled for a morning raid on a rail junction in Lille, France. Barnes traces the problem to a carburetor float valve, a minor component, but its failure causes fuel starvation at altitude. He replaces the valve by torchlight, the cold seeping through his coveralls. The engineering manual specifies a 20-minute replacement procedure. Barnes completes it in 14. He runs the engine to full throttle, monitoring fuel pressure gauges. The readings stabilize. At 05:45, the Mosquito departs on schedule. Barnes does not sleep. He remains in the hangar, tracking the mission by radio time checks. At 08:30, the aircraft returns, the raid successful. The pilot, Flight Lieutenant Edwards, reports smooth engine performance throughout. Barnes logs the repair in the maintenance ledger. Over the following month, similar carburetor issues appear across the Mosquito fleet. A batch defect traced to a subcontractor in Coventry. Barnes drafts a technical bulletin recommending inspection protocols. The Air Ministry distributes it to all Mosquito squadrons by November. The preventative measure averts an estimated 12 in-flight failures. Barnes receives no formal commendation. The work is routine. In his logbook, he notes only, DZ-414 airworthy, component replaced. The aircraft flies another 41 missions before war's end. On November 6, 1942, 12 Mosquitoes from No. 139 Squadron strike the Philips radio valve factory in Eindhoven, Netherlands. The target manufactures components for German radar systems. Intelligence estimates the factory produces 60% of the Wehrmacht's radio valves. The mission is low-level, bombing from rooftop height to ensure accuracy. Wing Commander G.P. Pickard leads the formation. They cross the channel at wave-top altitude, climbing to 500 feet over occupied Holland. At 12:28, the Mosquitoes reach Eindhoven. Anti-aircraft fire erupts immediately. Light flak from positions surrounding the factory Pickard's aircraft is hit in the starboard engine cowling but remains airborne. The bombs release. Delayed fuses allow the Mosquitoes to clear the blast zone. Post-strike reconnaissance photographs, taken 40 minutes later by a trailing Mosquito, show the factory's main production hall collapsed. Dutch resistance reports later confirm production ceased for 4 months. One Mosquito, piloted by Flight Lieutenant Reynolds, crashes short of the target, crew killed. The remaining 11 return to Marham. Damage assessments reveal multiple aircraft with shrapnel strikes, none sufficient to prevent flight. Pickard's starboard engine is declared unserviceable upon landing, the cowling perforated in 17 places. At the evening debriefing, intelligence officers calculate the mission's cost-to-effect ratio: 1 aircraft lost, 1 critical target neutralized for 17 weeks. The arithmetic favors replication. Orders go out. More Mosquito squadrons, more precision raids. December 1942 marks a shift in Mosquito deployment doctrine. On December 20th, Bomber Command authorizes the use of Mosquitoes as pathfinders, aircraft that mark targets with incendiaries ahead of heavy bomber streams. The first operation occurs on December 21st over Duisburg, Germany. 8 Mosquitoes from No. 109 Squadron, led by squadron leader J.H. Giles, arrive over the target at 1945, 10 minutes before the main force. They drop target indicators, pyrotechnic markers burning red, onto the rail yards. The heavy bombers, arriving at 1955, concentrate their loads on the illuminated zone. Post-raid analysis shows bombing accuracy improved by 43% compared to non-marked raids. The Mosquitoes encounter no losses. The success prompts expansion. By January 1943, the Pathfinder force incorporates Mosquito squadrons as standard procedure. The aircraft's speed allows it to evade defences while marking targets, then depart before German night fighters arrive. The tactical evolution is documented in Bomber Command summaries. Air Marshal Harris writes, "The Mosquito has become indispensable to precision." On December 31st, a statistical review covers the year's operations. Mosquitoes flew 1,273 sorties, with 18 aircraft lost, a loss rate of 1.4%. The figure is anomalous. No other RAF bomber type approaches that survival rate. The data is verified, then filed. The wooden aircraft, mocked 12 months prior, has redefined operational viability. On January 30th, 1943, 3 Mosquitoes execute a daylight raid on Berlin, timed to disrupt a speech by Goering commemorating the Nazi Party's 10th anniversary. The mission is psychological, demonstrating that no German city is beyond reach. Flight Lieutenant D.F.W. Darling leads the formation. They depart Marham at 10 Chill, flying at sea level across the North Sea to avoid radar, then climbing to 28,000 feet over the Baltic. At 11:05 they cross into Berlin airspace. Anti-aircraft batteries fire, but the shells detonate 2,000 feet below the Mosquito's altitude, fuse settings calibrated for lower-flying aircraft. The bombs release over the city centre at 11:07, falling through cloud cover. Goering's speech, scheduled for 11 Saug, is delayed by the air raid alert. Berliners crowd into shelters. The Mosquitoes turn northwest, descending rapidly over the Elbe estuary, and return to Marham by 1340. All 3 aircraft land safely. Fuel remaining, enough for 20 additional minutes of flight. The Berlin raid generates international press coverage. Neutral observers note the psychological impact. Germany's capital bombed in daylight by unarmed wooden aircraft. Goering does not reschedule the speech. In private, he orders a review of Berlin's air defences. The review, completed in February, recommends increasing the number of high-altitude fighters assigned to Reich Defence. The Mosquito, once dismissed, now dictates strategic resource allocation. By February 1943, the Mosquito's operational record prompts reflection within Bomber Command. Squadron leader Jeffrey Donn, now stationed at RAF Coningsby, reviews casualty reports from the winter's bombing campaign. Heavy bombers, Lancasters, Halifaxes, Stirlings logged 12,400 sorties between November and January, with 933 aircraft lost, the loss rate 7.5%. During the same period, Mosquitoes flew 891 sorties, losing 11 aircraft. The loss rate 1.2%. Donn calculates the differential. If the entire bomber force possessed the Mosquito's survivability, losses would have totaled 149 aircraft instead of 933. The missing number, 784 aircraft, each crewed by 7 men, represents 5,488 lives. The calculation is hypothetical, imperfect, but the magnitude is stark. Donn shares the analysis with no one. The Mosquito cannot replace the heavy bomber. Its payload is insufficient for area bombing campaigns, but the wooden aircraft proves a principle. Speed and altitude protect more effectively than armour and guns. On February 18th, Donn observes a Mosquito landing at Coningsby after a mission to Hamburg. The aircraft bears no visible damage. He watches the crew disembark, exhausted but alive. In his quarters that evening, Donn writes a letter to his brother, an engineer at de Havilland. He describes the Mosquito as the war's quietest revolution, changing doctrine without pronouncements. March 1943 sees the Mosquito integrated across multiple operational roles. Num 105 Squadron conducts low-level attacks on industrial targets. Num 139 Squadron flies reconnaissance missions deep into Germany. Pathfinder squadrons mark targets for night raids. Fighter variants, equipped with radar and cannons, intercept German bombers over Britain. The aircraft's versatility stems from its design, a lightweight, high-speed platform adaptable to varied missions. Flight Sergeant Henry Barnes, promoted to warrant officer, oversees maintenance operations at Marham. The tempo is relentless. Mosquitoes return from missions damaged by flak, requiring rapid turnaround. Barnes supervises a crew of 18 technicians, working in shifts to maintain operational readiness. On March 15th, he reviews attrition data. Of the 112 Mosquitoes delivered to Marham since July 1942, 19 have been lost to enemy action, 14 to operational accidents, and 79 remain serviceable. The survival rate exceeds projections. Barnes attributes this to the airframe's resilience, wood splinters rather than fractures, absorbing damage without catastrophic failure. On March 22nd, a Mosquito returns from a raid on Essen with 16 shrapnel holes in the fuselage and wings. Barnes inspects the damage. None of the holes penetrate critical systems. He assigns a repair crew. The aircraft is airworthy within 18 hours. Barnes documents the incident in his logbook. The wooden structure, he notes, behaves counterintuitively under fire. The aircraft survives what aluminum would not. By April 1943, the Mosquito's legacy begins to solidify. Production accelerates. De Havilland factories in Hatfield, Leavesden, and Canada deliver aircraft at increasing rates, reaching 32 per month. Orders expand beyond Bomber Command. Coastal Command requests maritime variants for anti-submarine patrol. Fighter Command seeks night fighter versions for bomber interception. The Air Ministry projects production of over 7,000 Mosquitoes by war's end. The wooden aircraft, conceived as an emergency measure during aluminum shortages, has become a cornerstone of RAF strategy. On April 25th, squadron leader Jeffrey Donn flies his final sortie before transferring to a training command. He reflects on 2 years of air operations. The Mosquito transformed combat calculus, not through firepower but through velocity and endurance. Don considers the men who did not survive, pilots lost in aircraft that lacked the Mosquito's speed. The comparison is uncomfortable but unavoidable. At Hatfield, Henry Barnes receives orders for deployment to North Africa, where Mosquito operations are expanding. He packs his tools, his logbooks, the accumulated technical knowledge of 18 months. On his final evening at Marham, Barnes walks the dispersal area. Mosquitoes line the hard stands, their plywood fuselages gleaming under floodlights. He thinks of the crews who flew them, the missions completed, the repairs made in darkness. The wooden aircraft outlasted skepticism, proving that innovation emerges from constraint. Barnes boards a transport aircraft the next morning. The Mosquito remains behind, operational, indispensable. The de Havilland Mosquito flew over 40,000 operational sorties during World War II, with a cumulative loss rate of 2.1%, the lowest of any Allied bomber. It served in every theatre from Norway to Burma, carrying roles from precision bombing to photo reconnaissance. The airframe's wooden construction, initially dismissed as obsolete, proved ideally suited to wartime production. Non-strategic, materials, distributed manufacturing, rapid repair. Post-war analysis confirmed what crews had learned empirically. The Mosquito's speed rendered traditional defensive armament unnecessary, redistributing weight to engines and payload. The aircraft's success validated a design philosophy: velocity as armor, precision over saturation. In archives at Kew, a file labeled Mosquito Operations 1942-1945 contains monthly loss statistics, mission reports, and production summaries. The numbers document a transformation. An improbable wooden aircraft, conceived during material shortages and strategic desperation, redefined what survival in combat required. The file closes with a note from Air Chief Marshal Harris, dated May 1945. No aircraft contributed more, with less fanfare, than the Mosquito. Its record speaks adequately. The wooden wonder, mocked by adversaries and doubted by allies, outlasted both skepticism and war. Its legacy remains in the data: sortie counts, survival rates, missions completed. The numbers, filed without commentary, rewrote the arithmetic of air combat. What began as expediency became doctrine. The Mosquito proved that innovation often arrives quietly, built from necessity, sustained by performance, remembered in the silence of surviving crews.